Okay. Welcome, everyone. Hare Krishna. Welcome to the Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 1 class. We're on the 5th class. We have completed the first 3 chapters. We're going to start the 4th chapter today. And chapters 4 and 5 really go well together. So we'll see how much we can do. Maybe we can get through 4 and some of 5. It's talking about the origins of Bhagavatam as a conversation between Narada and Vyasadeva. And I'm going to lead Kirtan. We're missing Kishori. She's in Mumbai, the Govardhan Village. And turn the musician's audio on here. Yeah. You can all hear this okay? Great. Settling into our seats, just finding our breath, taking a deep breath in through the nose, out through the mouth, releasing, and again, in, filling up, in, and out through the mouth. Hare Krishna. Calling out with gratitude to our teachers who are sharing the sound vibration of Srimad Bhagavatam, of Krishna's names, of the transcendental eternal science of our connection with the divine. We honor all spiritual masters of all spiritual paths. Everyone is welcome here. Om Jnanatimirantasya Jnananjana Shlakaya Chakshurunmiritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Vancha kalpatarupyascha kripa santubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hari Bol. Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hari Bol.
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna,
Krishna
Krishna Krishna, Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Narang Chaiva Narottamam Deving Saraswating Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet. Nashtaprayeshva Padreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtaki. Hare Krishna. All right, let's start with some reflections. We read this list of scheduled partial list. There's not a complete list because they're like the waves of the ocean, uncountable. But a partial list of scheduled incarnations of the Lord, including future incarnations, along with some of their symptoms, their purposes for appearance, and a little bit about the material manifestation, because the first incarnations listed were the Purusha avatars, the ones who are responsible for their activities are in relationship to the material energy. So things that stuck out for you, and also there were some nice reflections in chat, even on sections that we had already covered. So that's also totally fair game. Things you heard that you're taking away, you want to reflect back.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Are the Panchatattva considered avatars or incarnations of Krishna, or are they separate?
Great question. Lord Chaitanya is directly, he's mentioned in the 11th canto, 11.5. Look it up for you. It's two nice verses. And some other places. The idea is that, as is mentioned in Shastra, again, 11.5.32, and also I think 33, the next verse, 11.5.32 and 33 of Bhagavatam. In this particular Chatur Yuga, which means the cycle of 4 ages, coming back to this Yuga that we're in now, the Kali Yuga, there is no, the incarnation for this age is what's called Channa, covered. He doesn't manifest himself openly as the Lord. But his symptoms were given 11.5.32 and 33. That although he doesn't claim to be Krishna, he's always chanting Krishna's names. And he's coming with his associates and sharing this chanting process. Other scriptures, if you look in the first 3 chapters of the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's an extensive list of scriptural evidence to demonstrate that Lord Chaitanya is in fact Krishna. But as part of his mission, he's coming to share bhakti. And so he's in the mood of a devotee. So he's not identifying as Krishna, the supreme enjoyer, the object of worship. He's demonstrating Srimati Radharani's mood, the mood of serving Krishna. So it wouldn't work for him to come and say that he is Krishna. Also, one of the problems with this age is that you get a lot of fakers and people who say that, oh, I'm God, yeah, worship me. So even when God comes in Kali Yuga, he doesn't always demonstrate. So Lord Chaitanya is directly Krishna. Nityananda is Balaram. He is Krishna's first expansion. Sri Advaita is a partial incarnation of Mahavishnu and Sadashiva, a form of Shiva. Sri Gadadhar Pandit is a manifestation of the Lord's energy. So he's a manifestation of Srimati Radharani, Krishna's internal energy. And Srivas Thakur is a pure devotee. He's not in the category of God or his consort. He is a pure devotee. But they're all coming together, one after the other, and they're worshipped together as the Panchatattva. But yeah, Lord Chaitanya is actually Krishna. So if you want more information, I can put some scriptural references in chat for more in-depth study. You can learn about Lord Chaitanya and his associates. But the kind of silver bullet verse is 11.532, Srimad Bhagavatam. That's a nice one to look at. The purport.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. More questions, reflections. What did you hear?
I heard it's possible that there's an avatar coming now, which I've been hoping.
Oh, about
Because
Kelpi?
they're not even. But and I got a deeper appreciation for the fact that while many of these incarnations are considered the Lord at the time, the Supreme Lord was when Krishna came, because he was the Supreme, because he manifested all of the qualities, whereas many of the other avatars had specific purposes in coming, and it's sort of very pointed. But Krishna came, and there was the whole manifestation of all of his opulences and everything else. And I mentioned in my comment, somewhere in the purport of the first verse, it talked about, really catching, those who can catch bhakti or catch this essence of this is important. And I love the idea of catching, like catching so many different uses of the word catch, to nab, to grab something, catch the brass ring, catch a cold, catch, and it's really like
Catch my drift.
yeah, right. It's like the suddenness, and it made me think that it's not just a matter of a lot of yearning, it's a lot of grace too that comes into being able to have Krishna come into my life.
Thank you. Yeah, catching is the receiving. We're little objects of attention. We're giving our attention. We're trying to receive the transcendental sound vibration of the Bhagavatam, of Krishna's names. And as far as present incarnations, we even, this came up because one of the questions asked by the sages was, where is religion, spirituality gone with Krishna's actual departure? It seems like there's a giant void. And at the end of the chapter, verses 41, 42, and 43, it says that the Bhagavatam itself is arisen just like the sun to dispel the darkness of ignorance and give benediction to all. So Bhagavatam, these Bhakti literatures are actually like in very much an incarnation of the Lord, and also his name. Yeah, his name, which is a major theme in the Bhagavatam. It's going to come up again and again. It came up early in the first chapter, actually, and it's going to come up again and again. The power of chanting, the power of his names as a direct association with the Lord, especially in this age. Yeah. And I also appreciated your point about Krishna being, the manifesting the complete sweetness, all the qualities of Godhead. Not all the other forms do, because they have a curriculum. Sometimes they're just here for some certain purpose. Prabhupada gives the example of a light bulb and the full powerhouse. The light bulb is fulfilling a certain purpose, but that doesn't mean that it's a limitation on the powerhouse itself. Yeah. Wonderful. More reflections or questions or comments?
I just have a quick comment. I loved that, reading about this, that how I came to understand that Krishna descended into the world to uplift human spirituality or society. But when there was a need, a big need, one of these incarnations came through. And one of the things that happened to me last week, I was looking at old Wisdom of the Sages videos, and Radhanha Swami was talking about 16, the tortoise, the beautiful, all the water that took over the world, and the tortoise that came and lifted up the people, and about how they were churning the tortoise, and how it related to churning of the heart. And at first, the theists and atheists were churning to get the nectar of eternal life. And at first, all the poisons came out, and then the nectar. I just thought, what a great story it was, number one. And I wonder if there's other stories related to the other incarnations that would be similar to that. But yeah, that really kind of made me look at it all really, really differently. It was great. It was probably a podcast from 5 years ago. I just happened to stumble upon it. So yeah, I think it's episode 15, if anybody's interested. The other question I had, this might be like totally off the wall. Does anybody think that somebody like Jesus was an incarnation of Krishna?
Yeah, so your first point, yeah, that's the Kurmadev incarnation. And
Yes.
if you read the purports to that list, generally, I think Srila Prabhupada, no, maybe not always, but he may refer to what sections of even the Bhagavatam are talking about those pastimes. For example, Kurmadev is mentioned in Canto 8, Nrsingadev, Canto 7, Kapila Dev, Canto 3, chapters 25 to 32, Krishna himself, Canto 10, Ramachandra in passing, Canto 9, Rishabhadev, Canto 5. So like that. There's actually, the Bhagavatam is in many ways, one of its purposes is to list some of the, what's called, I forget the Sanskrit, but the list of activities of Krishna's pastimes. As far as Jesus, Srila Prabhupada commented on this. He said, first of all, I will say that Srila Prabhupada's mood in general, and the mood we find of Vaishnavas, is in keeping with our own bhakti conclusion, which is that you can't really know anybody till you serve them. And it's etiquette not to really comment too much about things outside of our own, experience and tradition. However, he did say many times about that he accepts Lord Jesus Christ as guru, and that his message was a message of how to develop love for God. And his Srila Prabhupada's perspective was that, this idea of like the Father and the Son, Jesus Christ is coming to teach about I've come to teach about my Father, and in the house of my Father there are many rooms, and like this, and Prabhupada's point was that Krishna is the Father. The Father is there. This whatever name you know them by, but he doesn't just have one son, because actually our perspective is that, and the last chapter backs us up, even when he's not just this direct incarnation, there are many empowered personalities who are actually just living entities, but pure devotees who come to share the spiritual science with the ignorant persons who've forgotten their way. And his perspective is that Jesus Christ is a particularly empowered one of that category, like a great devotee. Yeah, following him, his message was essentially to develop love and service to God.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it just
yeah.
dawned on me reading all these other ones. And yes, I'm hoping for an incarnation soon. If we can help human society and spirituality, I think we're probably past time. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, we have the name.
We do have a name?
We have the name. The name is the Maha Mantra, Krishna's names. That's the incarnation. That's the way. That's the main way. In that verse, that lists Lord Chaitanya's appearance. Krishna Varnam Trisha Krishnang Sango Pangastar Parshtam Yagnai Sankirtana Prayar Yajantihi Sumetasaha, which means that he is worshipped primarily through Sankirtana, getting together and chanting, which is what he directly taught, and which is what the scriptures say is what's called Yuga Dharma, the primary process for connecting. You could do other things. You could worship the deity. You can meditate. You can pray, and special empowerment is there to really connect with Krishna, with God, through his names, because it's portable and free, and it's really meeting us where we're at. And here we are, we can't go live on a mountaintop and meditate, and we can't worship the deity perfectly. Not that we shouldn't try, but it's an adjunct. It's supplementary to our chanting. Our chanting is the main thing, because here we are stumbling through life in this age, and Krishna's names come walking down the street and hit your eardrums. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. And you're like, oh, there's those weirdos again. or George Harrison singing My Sweet Lord or whatever, or any bona fide name. And he's making himself available, particularly if it's chanted with somebody who has some devotion in their heart. And what an accessible, what a like free phone call to the divine that's available on request, Collect calls. There was a thing called collect calls, kids. So yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, any more reflections before we jump in?
I have one.
Yeah.
So what's the question that's really on my mind right now is, and I asked this one of the first weeks that I listened to Wisdom of the Sages, and I'm still asking it because I'm not clear. And I know you sort of touched on it a little bit last week. Buddha, the Buddhism, not verses, but how can you help explain Buddha as an incarnation that's different, and how do we differentiate Buddhism from bhakti?
Bhakti is anywhere it is taught to develop love for the source. That's bhakti. Buddhism is not one thing. Just like Hinduism is not one thing. I mean, Vaishnavism, which is what we practice technically, this is Gaudiya Vaishnavism, the Vaishnavism of the Gauda region of Bengal, practiced by the followers of Lord Chaitanya, is a branch of so-called Hinduism. It's a gigantic, non-monolithic thing. Buddhism is similar. In keeping with what I said earlier, I don't like to comment on traditions that I'm not expert on and I'm not really steeped in, because it's not really appropriate. I wouldn't like if someone just come and start saying what Krishna Bhakti is that they didn't really have experience. But I will say from my studies, there are lineages of Buddhism that are devotional, very much so. Pure Land Buddhism is one, where they worship the Buddha as the divine. And there are others. And there are other kinds of Buddhism that are very much what's called anatma. They do not recognize the existence of an atma, a soul. They don't recognize, it's not part of the curriculum to discuss the possibility of the living entity having or being a soul, or any supreme soul, God, like that. Some leave it at the sense of like agnosticism, and some are directly atheistic in the sense of like, no, there is no such thing. It is ultimately the final issue. It's actually kind of a nihilistic strain idea that there is no real self, and you have to get beyond the idea of the self. Those are all various different kinds of very different ideas and very different perspectives, and therefore practices and moods under the umbrella of Buddhism. One way or another, the Bhagavatam's perspective is that the Buddha was an incarnation, and that's there. But how one orients oneself to that incarnation. I mean, Krishna even walked on the planet, and some people are like, that guy, I can't stand that guy. So it's not necessarily just like it's not necessarily a direct practice of bhakti to be like aware of but inimical or indifferent to the existence of potential presence of God in one form or another. Bhakti actually is defined in the Nectar of Devotion as, and again I want to remember the Sanskrit here. Anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karmadi anavritam anukulyena krishnanushilanam bhaktiruttama. Pure devotional service, pure bhakti, is defined as devotional service without any other motive. Again, that was there in the second chapter. Without interruption, without motivation. No other, you're not getting anything back for it. Anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karmadi anavritam, which means you're not performing it for some karmic benefit or some jnana benefit, some acquisition of spiritual knowledge even. Anukulyena krishnanushilanam, which means it's performed for the pleasure of the divine. For the pleasure of the divine. And it's a practice. Krishna anushilanam. Shilanam means practice, to cultivate. It's directly cultivated and practiced. So if one is explicitly trying to please the divine. That's also a prerequisite, at least for the highest level of devotion, which is pure devotional service. And anybody who's chanting any name, even one time, even unintentionally, is doing some devotional practice. But really, you have to put your heart into it. So it depends on what the practitioner of Buddhism is intending and what their orientation is. But I will say that various traditions and various kinds of strains within traditions have been trying for a long time to separate the living entity's tendency to have love and service for the divine from religion. And they've all failed to do that long term because it is who we are. You can't lobotomize people and tell them that they can't serve and love because it's just who we are. It's what we're made of. So you can create some philosophy that's devoid of that for some time. It'll generally sneak back in. So.
Now that was really helpful because I didn't realize there were varieties.
Nancy, you're unmuted. Mute for a second. There you go.
I didn't realize that there were different varieties of Buddhism, which is why that was really the source of my question, because I've heard it defined so many different ways that I couldn't wrap my brain fully around this chapter saying it was an incarnation of Krishna. Okay, so I get it now. I don't totally understand it, but that definitely helped me.
And you don't have to, because it's a big world.
Yeah.
But that's hopefully that gives you a sense.
Yes, thank you.
I just wanted to quickly ask, is that then, if it's any, does Prabhupada group anybody that is not serving, devotional service as a Mayavadi? Would some branches of Buddhism be considered Mayavadis, etc., or what distinct? Because I think of the 87th chapter, I'm like 2 pages away from the end of the 87th chapter, but it talks a lot about Mayavadis as it does in the Charitamrita, Chaitanya Charitamrita, yeah. So
maybe just mute real quick and I'll answer this because otherwise you echo.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've got okay, got it.
Okay, thank you. So the term Mayavadi, Srila Prabhupada refers to, he uses it often. You're referring to the 87th chapter of the Krishna book, which is a really deep presentation of the whole philosophy of bhakti and the Vedantic, the nitty-gritty of the philosophy and how it's been presented in different ways. One of the fundamental ideas that's come out of Indian Vedantic tradition is like the idea that we are all intrinsically one with the Supreme in an absolute sense, that we actually are that exactly. In other words, there's no distinctness of any other personality at any point, except perhaps under the illusion of the material world. But we all just merge back into that. That is not supported by an honest appraisal of the spiritual literature, because there are statements about our oneness and there are statements about our difference, and both are true simultaneously. In the sense that a drop of water from the ocean is also part of the ocean, is also the ocean. A ray of sun is also the sun, but it's not the whole sun. It's not the whole ocean. So that difference of opinion is called impersonalism. The idea that there is no personhood, that God is not a person, I am not a person, anyone listening to this is also essentially not a person. Thankfully, that's not correct. That's a kind of a naive misunderstanding, and it's categorized as what's called Mayavada, somewhat disparagingly by our acharyas, including Srila Prabhupada, who goes out of his way to point out the fallacies within that. So that's what he's referring to. It's not necessarily presented in the context of Buddhism at all. Buddhism, again.
Thank you. That helps. My brother's a Tibetan Buddhist, so it's totally. I've got a different, and I've got to talk to him to get some insight into that. So okay.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, let's jump into this 4th chapter. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. All right. Starting Canto 1, Chapter 4. The appearance of Sri Narada. Speaking of great devotees and teachers, Narada is one of the greatest. and he figures prominently throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is his first appearance in the Canto. He's going to come up several times as we read the Bhagavatam. So let me read the purport to verse 1, because actually verse 1 has got a really beautiful statement I've always really appreciated. Canto 1, chapter 4, verse 1. So from the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, he defines the what is called personal realization, right? Because the verse says, on hearing Sutta Goswami speak, Sutta is the speaker they've elected to speak, Shaunaka, who is the elder learned leader of all the rishis or sages engaged in that prolonged sacrificial ceremony, congratulated Sutta Goswami by addressing him as follows. So they'd asked him to speak. And he's already spoken about the incarnations, listing them. Now in the purport, Prabhupada says, Sri Sutta Goswami expressed his desire to present Srimad Bhagavatam exactly as he had heard it from Shukadeva Goswami, and also realized it personally. Personal realization does not mean that one should, out of vanity, attempt to show one's own learning by trying to surpass the previous acharya. Acharya means teacher. It also means somebody fundamentally who teaches by example. Somebody who walks the talk. In other words, well, I'll let Prabhupada finish his statement before I comment. Does not mean that one should, out of vanity, attempt to show one's own learning by trying to surpass the previous acharya. They must have full confidence in the previous acharya, and at the same time, they must realize the subject matter so nicely that they can present the matter for the particular circumstances in a suitable manner. And then in italics, remember, italics means when it's not just a Sanskrit quote or something. When Prabhupada is using italics in an English sentence, it means he's really trying to emphasize it for us. So this next sentence is italicized. The original purpose of the text must be maintained. No obscure meaning should be screwed out of it, yet it should be presented in an interesting manner for the understanding of the audience. This is called realization. So this is coming up here because Srila Prabhupada's taking the opportunity to talk about this, because we have what's called in Sanskrit parampara, a succession of teachers. Now, Sutta Goswami said, okay, I heard all this from Shukadev, who heard it from his father, Vyasa. And he spoke it to Parikshit on the banks of the Ganges because Parikshit was going to die, and he took shelter of Shukadev. He wanted to know the answers to these questions. I was in the audience. I will now present to you what I heard from my own teacher, Shukadev. And so we have a grand teacher teaching, the current teacher teaching us. Right? If we put ourselves in the shoes of all the sages gathered in Naimisharanya, actually we're many generations below that, but it's the same principle. And so Prabhupada is speaking to this principle of speaking from personal realization, which is that this tightrope is there, that we're not actually inventing anything. You see, in the empirical context, like in academia or something, you want to create something novel. You want to have the Shamyapras method. You want to have, the Samantha Burrier technique. It's just you need to have that. You need to have that so that you justify getting tenure, and like there's a certain amount of ego, and it's like, yeah, you build on the previous research, but you have to provide something new. We're not doing that here. If I'm doing this properly, this speaking of Bhagavatam, I will never add anything that's not already there. I will never take anything away. However, it must be represented. Why does it have to be represented? Because time, place, and circumstance are always changing. Because time, place, and circumstance are always changing, representing eternal truth is an ongoing experience. Krishna does this in Bhagavad Gita, where he's like, hey, I taught this science already to so many people, but in due course of time, it appears to be lost, so I'm teaching you again, Arjuna. So Prabhupada does it when he translates it into English for us, because who's going to, someone said, like, okay, you can have bhakti, but you have to learn Sanskrit and study it in the original Sanskrit. It's like, good luck, right? Here's somebody coming to the West and giving it to you. It's like somebody asking for water, and then you say, well, yeah, just go dig a hole, right? Or put your cup up and wait for it to rain. Like, that's not very merciful. Give them a glass of water. Extend yourself. So there has to be a way in which people actually understand what their teachers have given them, and without trying to create a new novel, personal spin on it, they represent it as it is. The example Prabhupada gives, or analogy, is like if you have a tree, and the tree is like full of really, really ripe fruits, right? Like they're so ripe. You can't just like shake the tree and have them fall and hit the ground because they'll blow up and explode. They're so ripe. What you do is you have someone climb to the top, and they get the best fruit. Best fruits are at the top of the tree, by the way. Why? Because that gets the most sun. Get the top of the tree, best fruit, maybe on the eastern side, you get the rising sun, and then you pass it down hand to hand until someone you could just be sitting at the bottom like this, and you just boop, there it is, ripe. You name your fruit, Hawaiian mango, right? And it's just ready to go. So that's the idea of personal realization, is that the subject matter is presented in an interesting way, in a way that's relevant for the cultural context, in a way that's relevant for the time and place, language, mood, approach, but nothing is changed in the essentials. Nothing is changed, right? And we see that that's happening. That's actually happening. What's the evidence? Well, for one thing, after Srila Prabhupada translated these books and they were edited, they were translated again into like 40 different languages. And in 40 different languages or whatever, people are becoming very inspired to practice bhakti. And who translated them? Well, some sincere devotee somewhere translated into Swahili and Farsi and Urdu and Arabic and, you know, Pashto and Mandarin Chinese and what have you. And so the idea is that they had to be sincere, and the sincere listener is receiving the same basic spiritual science from them. So it works. If the sincerity is there, and we don't actually change the message. We're just reading from the purport to Canto 1, Chapter 4, Verse 1, talking about the definition of personal realization. So I've always liked that purport because I feel very relevant to all of us. So going from there, now the chapter continues. So let me just consult my notes here, because I think in this chapter there's another question answered. So in the first 13 verses of this chapter, there's several other questions that come up that have to do with why, when, where the Srimad Bhagavatam was compiled, right? And so that comes up here. We'll read the verses. Verse 2, Shonaka is basically saying, Suta Goswami, you're the most fortunate and respected of all those who can speak and recite. Please relate the pious message of Srimad Bhagavatam, which was spoken by the great and powerful sage Shukadeva Goswami. Verse 3, in what period and at what place was this first begun, and why was this taken up? From where did Vedavyasa, the great sage, get the inspiration to compile this literature? And so those questions are answered throughout this chapter and the next. So after that, we get into Vyasadeva, who compiled these literatures, including the Bhagavatam, and Shukadeva Goswami, who we already know is the one who learned from Vyasadeva. He's the son of Vyasadeva, and he teaches many people, including Suta Goswami, who's now speaking this. So about this these two persons, Shukadeva Goswami is mentioned in verse 4. It says, Vyasadev's son was a great devotee, an equibalanced monist. Monist means somebody who'd realized their qualitative oneness with the Supreme, whose mind was always concentrated in monism. Again, oneness. He was transcendental to mundane activities, but being unexposed, he appeared like an ignorant person. Right? Verse 6, how was he, Srila Shukadeva, the son of Vyasa, recognized by the citizens when he entered the city of Hastinapura? That's modern Delhi. After wandering in the provinces of Kuru and Jangala, appearing like a madman. How did it so happen that King Parikshit met this great sage, making it possible for this great transcendental essence of the Vedas, the Bhagavatam, to be sung to him? Right? So we're getting to the backstory. We've heard about the broader context of Krishna and the creation of the universe and some of the avatars, and We've heard about the process of bhakti in abstraction. Now we're going to see it in action. The process of bhakti in the persons of Vyasadeva and Narada Muni and Shukadeva Goswami. And so it's going to get like a little bit what's called Leela, pastimes, interactive. So, verse 8. He, Shukadeva Goswami, was accustomed to stay at the door of a householder only long enough for a cow to be milked. And he did this just to sanctify the residence. The idea of that was that Shukadeva Goswami was a mendicant. He didn't actually work for a living. He lived on whatever came his way, whatever he could receive as charity. And he was just wandering. And as such, he didn't lead classes. He was not a formal teacher. He would never stay at anybody's house for long enough to do anything. He would just go and beg for like a cup of milk from the householders who all had their own cows, and they would milk the cow, give him some milk, and he would live on that for the day and just go wander and chant and be absorbed in this meditation. So the question is like, how did this meditation manifest into like an instruction? How did it become a conversation with this king who was supposed to die? Like, how did that all happen? And then, about this king, verse 9, it is said that Maharaj Parikshit was a great first-class devotee of the Lord, and his birth and activities are all wonderful. Please tell us about him. He was a great emperor and possessed all the opulences of his acquired kingdom. He was so exalted that he was increasing the prestige of the Pandu dynasty. Why did he give up everything to sit down on the bank of the Ganges and fast until death? So the context was that Shukadev instructed Parikshit because Parikshit was cursed. That'll come up later in this canto. But the idea is, in summary, as we hear in this verse, Maharaj Parikshit was a great king. Maharaj means great king. He was actually an emperor. He had performed all his duties very nicely. He was also a great devotee. But due to a series of events that I won't get into right now, he was cursed by somebody whose curse could stick. And he chose not to fight it. The curse was, you're going to die in 7 days. He was cursed in anger. And he accepted, okay, I'm going to die. And because of that, he started to ask the deeper questions, right? Because, and this is where it becomes a little real for us, is that we're all going to die too. We don't know. Now, Parikshit knew he was going to die in exactly 7 days. We don't even have that assurance. We may not make it to the end of today or this sentence for all we know, right? And Prabhupada used to joke, he would say like, actually, we're also going to die in 7 days. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. One of those days. And he decided with the writing on the wall that he has to leave his body, he decided to ask the deeper questions. What is my purpose? What is the best thing I can do with my time? And that conversation he has, really he's just listening from the majority of it, with Shukadev is what comprises the bulk of this Bhagavatam. So more about this king Parikshit. Verse 11, he was such a great emperor that all his enemies would come and bow down at his feet and surrender all their wealth for their own benefit. He was full of youth and strength, and he possessed kingly opulences that were difficult to give up. Why did he want to give up everything, including his life? Right? Sometimes we find this tendency of great rulers is that they hold on to power. You know, you're elected to office and you never want to leave. You're a king and you have all the benefits or whatever, you never want to leave it. But he very easily left it all behind. How was that even possible for him to do? Verse 12, those who are devoted to the cause of the personality of Godhead live only for the welfare, development, and happiness of others. They do not live for any selfish interests. So even though the emperor was free from all attachment to worldly possessions, how could he give up his mortal body, which was the shelter for others? In other words, he was so responsible that he wouldn't just like give up living when he was already in a position of responsibility for others. They were depending on him. He's a great leader. He's a father, he's a husband, and he's like a father to all of his citizens. Why would he just leave all that behind? So to explain all that, we're going to have first the story of Vyasadeva and how he was inspired to speak the Bhagavatam. So in verse 15 rather, once upon a time he, Vyasadeva, as the sun rose, took his morning ablution in the waters of the Saraswati and sat alone to concentrate. The great sage Vyasadeva saw anomalies in the duties of the millennium. Millennium in this context means age. He knew that the upcoming age was the age we live in now. He saw what is called here anomalies. This happens on the earth in different ages due to the unseen force of time. So, in the purport, Prabhupada says, the great sages like Vyasadeva are liberated souls, and therefore they can see clearly past and future. Thus, he could see the future anomalies in the Kali age, this age. And accordingly, he made arrangements for the people in general so that they can execute a progressive life in this age, which is full of darkness. The people in general in this age of Kali are too much interested in matter, which is temporary. Because of ignorance, they are unable to evaluate the assets of life and be enlightened in spiritual knowledge. Right? Contrast it with, we hear about how Shukadev, he was so simple that he would just go door to door and he would knock on the door and ask for some, what we would consider a handout. But they were so pious, they recognized he's a great advanced spiritualist. They would happily give something. Would that work today? Probably not. Depends what culture you're in, I suppose. But as a symptom of the degradation, there's not as much room for people to just be dedicated to spiritual life. And those who appear to be often are just faking it too. So these kinds of things were spotted by Vyasadeva. And they're called anomalies. He could see there's going to be trouble, clouds on the horizon. 17 to 18. The great sage, who was fully equipped in knowledge, could see through his transcendental vision the deterioration of everything material due to the influence of this age. He could also see that the faithless people in general would be reduced in duration of life and would be impatient due to lack of goodness. Thus he contemplated for the welfare of persons in all statuses and all orders of life. Right? And the purport Prabhupada talks about how even the ability of the earth to provide grains and so forth for harvest was going to be decreasing. The duration of life is going to be decreasing. People's patience, attention span for spiritual activities, higher knowledge, decreasing. Also, he says here, the unfortunate persons of this age are always reluctant to give a reception to the transcendentalists who are representatives of Sri Vyasadeva and selfless workers, always busy in planning something which may help everyone in all statuses and orders of life. The greatest philanthropists are those transcendentalists who represent the mission of Vyasa, Narada, Madhva, Chaitanya, Rupa, Saraswati, etc. They are all one and the same. The personalities may be different, but the aim of the mission is one and the same, namely, to deliver the fallen souls back home, back to Godhead. Verse 19, Vyasadeva saw, that the sacrifices mentioned in the Vedas, which were meant by which the people's occupation could be purified. There were means, rather, by which the people's occupations could be purified. And to simplify the process, he divided the one Veda into 4, in order to expand them among men. The 4 divisions of the original sources of knowledge, the Vedas, were made separately. But the historical facts and authentic stories mentioned in the Puranas are called the 5th Veda. So, a little bit of a context. The Puranas, of which this Bhagavatam is one, is the Bhagavad Purana, is considered to be like the 5th Veda. Because whereas the Vedas are speaking kind of like prescriptively, they're telling you what you should do, the Puranas are describing things descriptively. The same spiritual knowledge is given through people's pastimes. By hearing about what it's like for Vyasadeva, what it's like for Shukadeva Goswami, what it's like for Narada Muni, what it's like for this king who's fasting, King Parikshit. We hear about their story, and we learn by that recounting of their experience. No one's like telling you, you should do this, you should worship God, no one's actually doing that exactly. It's a different mode, and it's helpful for people in this age because we don't have the attention span. We don't have necessarily the purity of purpose. The presentation mode is different. So we find that the Bhagavatam, as with all the other Puranas, Padma Purana, Vishnu Purana, like that, they're much more approachable than the Vedas. It makes almost no sense to try to even read the Vedas. By the way, the actual original Vedas, most of them are not even available anymore. They're gone. We don't have them. They're extinct. What we do have is we have some of the Upanishads, which are parts of the Vedas. Some of you have studied the Isha Upanishad with me. The Isha Upanishad is the Isha Upanishad. It's part of, I forget which of the 4 Vedas, so it's there. We also find that the Vedas are more indirect. They use analogies. They'll use things like, descriptions of the Supreme is inside everything and outside everything. He walks but does not walk. He is very near but very far away as well. That's a verse directly from the Isha Upanishad. And Bhagavatam is more direct. It's the personal pastimes of Krishna and his incarnations. Okay. There's a description of the Vedas and who they are entrusted to among Vyasa's disciples. And then he compiled the Mahabharata. And then this is a very important verse here. Verse 26, still his mind was not satisfied, although he engaged himself in working for the total welfare of all people. Thus, the sage Vyasadeva, being dissatisfied at heart, at once began to reflect, because he knew the essence of religion. And he said within himself, I have, under strict disciplinary vows, unpretentiously worshipped the Vedas, the spiritual masters, and the altar of sacrifice. I have also abided by the rulings and have shown the import of disciplic succession through the explanation of the Mahabharata, by which even women, Shudras, and others can see the path of religion. Meaning persons who are not directly trained to study spiritual literature, right? Persons who don't go to a school from the time they're 5 years old to study spiritual literature, because that's the way the age was going to be. For all of us, we're not really trained to study like Brahmins of previous ages. He's saying, I've done everything so that anybody can actually approach spiritual knowledge, but, verse 30, I am feeling incomplete, though I myself am fully equipped with everything required by the Vedas. Verse 31, this may be because I did not specifically point out the devotional service of the Lord, which is dear both to perfect beings and to the infallible Lord. From the purport, the dissatisfaction which is being felt by Sri Vyasadeva is expressed herein in his own words. This was felt for the normal condition of the living being in the devotional service of the Lord. Unless one is fixed in the normal condition of service, neither the Lord nor the living being can become fully satisfied. This defect was felt by him when Narada Muni, his spiritual master, reached him. It is described as follows. Verse 32, as mentioned before, Narada reached the cottage of Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa on the banks of the Saraswati, just as Vyasadeva was regretting his defects. And then Vyasadeva gets up and offers him respect. So that's chapter 4, actually. And it leads right into the conversation that Vyasadeva has with his teacher. So even Vyasadeva, who's an empowered incarnation listed in the previous chapter, he's a living entity. He's not God, but he's entrusted to do something that's so potent and so important that only someone who's directly empowered by God can do, which is to present the spiritual literature in the first place. Even he has a spiritual teacher. So who is his teacher? Narada, also called Narada Muni. Muni means like sage. The great Narada Muni. And we're going to hear a lot from him and a lot about him. And the instructions he gives to his student comprise the entire next chapter. So as some of you know, and I'm going to pause in a second for reflections and questions, so we'll get to that, but as some of you know, on Fridays we do this Friday morning program thing where we chant and we have a little bit of a Bhagavatam class. And we started that a couple of years ago now, and I've chosen a couple of different sections to read from. The very first section I chose was this 5th chapter, the one we're going to start, because it's such a nice conversation. It's one of the kind of classic chapters. Another one I chose was the 2nd chapter of the 1st canto. The one we're on now is actually the 8th chapter of the 1st canto. The 1st canto has a lot of real greatest hits. So if you want to learn more as we're going into this 5th chapter, you can check out my YouTube channel, the same YouTube channel you find all these classes on, and look under Srimad Bhagavatam classes. And you'll find a list of classes for the 1st chapter, Canto 5th chapter. And they're like, each class is like 45 minutes talking on each verse for about 15 or 20 verses. So we'll get to that. But before we get to the 5th chapter, we finished chapter 4. Let's get some reflections. What stood out to you? Or questions?
What does that mean? Was regretting his defects, just
Yeah.
he wasn't worthy?
He felt that, and he'll get into it in the next chapter as well. He felt incomplete. He felt incomplete. What else is said about that here? Verse 27, he felt dissatisfied at heart. Nati prasidad. He was not satisfied in his heart. Purport, the sage began to search out the cause of not being satisfied at heart. Perfection is never attained until one is satisfied at heart. This satisfaction of heart has to be searched out beyond matter. His intuition was telling him he wasn't complete. Keep in mind he's a devotee. He's a great devotee. As one practices bhakti, there's a way in which one's intuition becomes refined. Because bhakti means to be in touch with Krishna, which, if you think about it, is extraordinary. To hear God. How often do we actually say, like, I'm actually hearing God, I'm actually one with, that's an incredible claim to make. But when you practice bhakti, that actually becomes more and more true for longer and longer until you're really in communion all the time. So your intuition is guided because Krishna in the heart is guiding us. So for advanced devotees, or even advancing devotees, there's like more of a sense of like, okay, I need to talk to this person, I need to like read this book. Something is telling me this. I'm not feeling, we all have intuition actually. Even like atheistic materialists have intuition. That's just Krishna in the heart. But that becomes more refined. So he was like listening to his heart and he's like, this isn't right. Something's not right here. But he didn't try to figure it out on his own. His teacher appears, coincidentally. Obviously, Narada Muni is sent to reciprocate with his student who's feeling this incompleteness. And he takes shelter of his teacher, which is the great way to go. Otherwise, what's the point of having teachers if we've got to figure it out ourselves? But it's an interesting thing when you feel like, something's not right, but you're not quite able to figure it out. Yeah. More reflections, questions, or comments on the 4th chapter?
I thought it was interesting that and we didn't read this verse, but it's where the gopis become sort of when Vyasadeva and Sukadev come near them when they're bathing, that they're embarrassed with Vyasadeva but not with Sukadev, because Sukadev is a pure devotee and is considered to be a gopi himself.
Yeah, it's not that they were gopis. This wasn't in Vrindavan, but they were women. This is a verse that came up.
Verse 5, I think.
Yeah, it's about the quality of Shukadev Goswami.
Yeah, it's beautiful that the son.
Yeah, while Vyasadeva was following his son, beautiful young damsels who were bathing naked covered their bodies with cloth, although Vyasadeva himself was not naked. But they had not done so when his son had passed. The sage inquired about this, and the young ladies replied that his son was purified, and when looking at them, made no distinction between male and female. So Vyasadeva is a pure devotee, but he's functioning within the world. He's married, he has a family, and he is existing within the world, and so he's forced to make distinctions. He exists in a social order. His son was so much outside of society. He was just wandering naked. And Shukadev was at this point in his history. And he made no distinction between male and female. He had no attachment to matter whatsoever. And despite them being just passers-by, they were just bathing in a pond, they could see by his characteristics, that's the kind of person he was. So even though Vyasadeva is a great devotee in his own right, they displayed modesty around him because they could see he's functioning as a man. He's functioning in the world, right? He knows he's not his body, but still he's existing in the context of the world. So his son isn't. His son is like a wild man.
Yet he was the one that spoke to King Parikshit.
Yeah, and that's why it's very difficult for persons in that mode of life to be understood. He looked like he was foolish or not right in the head, because someone could look at him and think this person is just crazy because he didn't function in society, but he was actually just indifferent because he was completely liberated. Yeah, interesting point.
Is the feeling of incompleteness, is that trying to be resolved around, I mean, it feels like so much becomes presented, but is the root of that like incompleteness around not speaking directly about Krishna being the supreme personality of Godhead, or is it around um like instruction not having been like even clear around bringing everyone to the platform of unalloyed devotional service?
It's directly going to be answered by Narada in the next few minutes. Stay tuned. Any other reflections or questions or comments? I think we have time not for this whole chapter coming up, but enough time to really get the essence of what Narada Muni is going to say before he elaborates on it. So maybe I'll do that, and then we'll just end for the night, and we'll take any final questions or reflections then. So chapter 5, one of my favorite chapters. A lot of classic verses in this chapter. Narada's instructions on Srimad Bhagavatam for Vyasadeva. So he gets up, he welcomes his spiritual teacher. He seats him. Verse 2, addressing Vyasadeva, the son of Parashar, Narada inquired, are you satisfied by identifying with the body or the mind as objects of self-realization? Your inquiries were full, and your studies were also well fulfilled. And there's no doubt that you have prepared a great and wonderful work, the Mahabharata, which is full of all kinds of Vedic sequences, elaborately explained. You have fully delineated the subject of impersonal Brahman, as well as the knowledge derived therefrom. Why should you be despondent in spite of all this, thinking that you are undone, my dear Prabhu? Interesting point of etiquette. Prabhu means master. It literally is what it means. And you find like devotees will often call each other Prabhu. Here we have a spiritual teacher calling their own disciple Prabhu. So how much the humility is there that he's like so appreciative of his disciples' services, he calls him Prabhu, master, although he's actually the master. But he's actually bringing out this important point, like you've delineated impersonal Brahman, all these things. Why are you unhappy? Verse 5, Vyasadeva said, all that you have said about me is perfectly correct. Despite all this, I am not pacified. I therefore question you about the root cause of my dissatisfaction. For you are a man of unlimited knowledge due to your being the offspring of one, Brahma, who is self-born, without mundane father and mother. Remember we mentioned the first of the demigods, Brahma, comes from the Lord's body directly. Narada is coming from him directly. And Vyasadeva knows this. And he's saying, you're so great. You please help me understand. From the purport. In the material world, everyone is engrossed with the idea of identifying the body or the mind with the self. As such, all knowledge disseminated in the material world is related either with the body or with the mind. And that is the root cause of all despondencies. This is not always detected, even though one may be the greatest erudite scholar in materialistic knowledge. It is good, therefore, to approach a personality like Narada to solve the root cause of all despondencies. Right? If you all think about like why you started practicing bhakti, what you were feeling, and what you felt without any kind of connection to bhakti in your life, you'll get a sense of what Prabhupada is talking about here, because the idea of being fully satisfied without being in touch with spirit, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't happen. I mentioned this at a little joint class we had a while ago, last week or something, a week before at Kula Yoga, and Allison liked it, and she pointed out that I said it, and I was like, oh yeah, I did say it, didn't I? I said, we were doing like a yin, she was doing a yin class, Kishori was leading, and I was like dropping little nuggets of wisdom every few minutes. And at one point I was talking about how, consider the possibility of what the spiritual literature is sharing, that you're not your body. You're not your mind. You're actually a unit of consciousness. And then a few minutes went by, hold this pose, breath, asana, that. And I said, so now consider, if you are not a combination of material elements, it will never be possible for any combination of material elements to satisfy you. Right? That's actually what we're seeing here. What Prabhupada is talking about. But it's so refined that even though a great devotee like Vyasadeva, who is beyond matter, he's still not satisfied. So what is the problem? Well, we're going to get to that. So he glorifies his teacher for a few verses, he glorifies his qualities, and then in verse 8, his teacher, because he's been asked, this is a nice lesson for us. Even when you're a teacher, you have to be very careful in giving instruction. Don't give instruction until somebody comes to you and says, hey, can you do me a favor and let me know like what I can do better? Why? Because people are touchy. It's hard. It's hard being a teacher. You know? It's hard being a parent. It's hard knowing more. You have to be really patient. But here, Vyasadeva is a first-class disciple. What's a first-class disciple? Someone who's like, you know what? I need help. Please help me. Arjuna was like that in the beginning of Bhagavad Gita. I cannot figure this out, Krishna. You really got to help me. And then Krishna's like, I got you. So now Narada Muni gives it to him. Verse 8. Sri Narada Uvacha. Bhavatannudita prayang yasho bhagavato manam yenai vasav nitusheta manyata darshanam kilam. Sri Narada said, you have not actually broadcast the sublime and spotless glories of the personality of Godhead. That philosophy which does not satisfy the transcendental senses of the Lord is considered worthless. Heavy word, worthless. Although, great sage, you have very broadly described the four principles beginning with religious performances, you have not described the glories of the Supreme Personality, Vasudeva, another name for Krishna. The four principles of religious performance, beginning with religious performance, that's dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. It means like religiosity, religion in general, like the ritualism of it. Economic development, how to actually live in the world and sustain yourself. Kama, how to gratify the senses in a regulated way. And moksha, even moksha, which is the highest of the four, liberation, getting beyond matter entirely. Although you've described these four things, because these are the four topics of all spiritual literature, you have not actually described the glories of the source, the Supreme Person himself. That's the fifth, what's called Purusharthas, fifth purpose, prema, pure love. From the purport, the root cause of the despondency of Vyasadeva was his deliberate avoidance in glorifying the Lord in his various editions of the Puranas. He has certainly, as a matter of course, given description of the glories of the Lord, Sri Krishna, but not as many as given to religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and salvation. These four items are by far inferior to engagement in the devotional service of the Lord. Right? And verse 10 and verse 11 are two really famous verses. Verse 10, he says, those words which do not describe the glories of the Lord, who alone can sanctify the atmosphere of the whole universe, are considered by saintly persons to be like unto a place of pilgrimage for crows. Since the all-perfect persons are inhabitants of the transcendental abode, they do not derive any pleasure there. The next verse is the verse that Prabhupada quoted in his introduction to the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's a verse that he uses to justify translating the Bhagavatam, and we'll see why. The verse says, on the other hand, that literature which is full of descriptions of the transcendental glories of the name, fame, words, pastimes, etc., forms, pastimes, etc., of the unlimited Supreme Lord is a different creation, full of transcendental words directed toward bringing about a revolution in the impious lives of this world's misdirected civilization. Such transcendental literatures, even though imperfectly composed, are heard, sung, and accepted by purified persons who are thoroughly honest. Beautiful verse. Tadvag visad goja nataga viplavo yasmin pratishrokam abhattavatyapi. Namani anatasya shonkitani shrunvanti gayanti grananti sadhava. So we'll pause there. He's saying here, you weren't direct enough to describe the source. You've given like instruction and structure by which people can live a pious life, right? Sometimes people say like, yeah, religion's a good thing. It helps people to be good moral people. Actually, what Narada Muni is saying here is that's actually not even the main point. That's a byproduct. It's good. It's necessary. I mean, you don't really have like a stable society. People are just vicious to each other, right? We can see from current events what happens when there's violence, unjustified aggression, how disturbing it is, even for devotees who are like really interested in chanting Hare Krishna. It's very disturbing. Just to not have like basic civil moral behavior is very disturbing. However, there's no point at which just the presence of moral conduct satisfies the soul completely. And although Vyasadeva is a liberated soul, and he's so advanced that he himself presented all these literatures to help people live a civilized life and come at least indirectly in touch with God, he's still feeling like he didn't do his job completely. And Narada said, well, since you asked, my dear student, I'll tell you it's because you didn't directly glorify the source. And directly glorifying the source does something completely different than indirectly pleasing the source. How to understand this? Prabhupada gives it like this. He gives this example. He says, like, if you live in a country, and in your experience of living as a citizen in that country, you obey all the laws, it can be said, on some level, you are pleasing the supreme leader of your country, right? Because you're not creating a disturbance. It's like you're a student in the class. You're like coming to class on time. You like take a shower before you come, so you're not stinking the place up, and like you do all the stuff, and you're part of the system. It works, right? You're not disturbing. You don't have to be put into timeout. You have to go into prison or whatever, right? You're not running red lights. Great. But do you really know your leader? Do you really have a connection with him? Probably not. For them, for you, it's just an idea. It's a formal idea of a person somewhere. Now, if there is a source, and there's a supreme personal aspect to that source, what if we could actually connect with that personally? Right? It's nice. It's nice to be a good person. In fact, great devotees are always moral, upstanding people because they know, why would I be anything otherwise? How is that pleasing Krishna? How does that please higher power? To be a jerk? To be vicious to other living entities? We're all coming from the same source. But they go beyond that to just being nice, to actually like seeing, yeah, I'm nice because this person's coming from source. And this is how lovable source is. And these are some of their pastimes. These are some of their names, some of their forms, the divine source, the divine person. That's a whole other level. And Narada is saying you didn't give him a chance to do that. Right? You didn't give him a chance to actually connect with that directly. He's going to elaborate on this beautifully, I would say. And we'll get next week. But we're going to pause for now. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Yeah.
So we got to like Canto 1, Chapter 5, verse, I would say, 11. Yeah, verse 11. So for this week, please read at least those verses. If you want to go deeper, read the purports, please. Prabhupada, he pours so much of himself and weaves together the Shastra in these purports. He's so brilliant. Such a beautiful presentation. If you want to go even deeper, I have given classes on a lot of these verses in the 5th chapter. And you can also just ask questions in the chat. We can dive deeper into any specific topic. I would love to hear any reflections on what you heard, the 4th or 5th chapter so far, or wherever else you happen to be. If you're behind, that's okay too. And we'll pause now for reflections, questions, comments, anything you heard at all today that stood out. We can explore for the next few minutes. Hare Krishna.
I feel like text 11, I don't know, because I just came up and it reminds me of from chapter 3, text 31
Of the
of Canto
Hmm.
on page 180, and it's just
Let me
the
find that
way
verse.
Prabhupada reiterates, over and over again, but it gives us examples in different perspectives. And it's not, to me, I feel like it connects because it's kind of like seeing the forest through the trees. Like you have to, like we get so distracted by all the external things, but we really forget what our focus is. And I feel like, to me,
Mission drift.
yeah,
There's mission drift.
right. Right, and that's kind of what it sounds like Narada, is it Narada Muni?
Is saying
Is saying.
Vyasadeva did, yeah.
Yeah.
That verse you're referencing, the verse says 1:331, clouds and dust are carried by the air, but less intelligent persons say that the sky is cloudy and the air is dirty. Similarly, they also implant material bodily conceptions on the spirit self. They get distracted. We get distracted. We lose our focus. There's mission drift. Even among great devotees, it can happen. And so the necessity of having a spiritual teacher, of listening to your heart, he did that first, and then he listened to his external manifestation of guru. There's guru in the heart. There's also the external guru, and for that reminder, yeah. Otherwise, if we didn't need that, we wouldn't be in trouble in the first place. I would never have forgotten.
And we wouldn't have to be told over and over and over again in
Yeah.
multiple ways.
And there's never shame.
No.
You know, Narada is very direct with his disciple, but only because he was asked to be so. It's actually a great mercy to have a teacher who tells you calls you out when you ask for it. As somebody who teaches, I can say, like, it's such a time saver when someone comes to you proactively and says, you know what do you think I should do? Right? It's like first class is like you go to your teacher, you're like, what do you think I should do? And I'll do it. Second class is like, I want to do this. Do you think it's a good idea? Third class is like, you just like do whatever anyway, you know? Then your relationship with the teacher is just a formality practically. So it's such a time saver because you're like, oh, great. Here's the thing, you know? That student mind, that beginner's mind. And Vyasadeva had that. And so therefore Narada is very direct with him. He's not actually like talking down to him. He's never shaming him. We don't have to feel ashamed for forgetting our spiritual purpose or getting distracted because, hey, it happens to the best of us. Look, right here, there's Vyasadeva. I'm never going to be as great a devotee as Vyasadeva. And here he is, like losing his way temporarily. So it's okay. Krishna's got us. It's part of the deal. You know, he's going to remind us. So don't beat yourself up. But do center yourself again, do rectify, because that's what it's all about. Whether it means coming to Tuesday Shastra class, which is what I do to get Krishna conscious, or chanting your rounds, or, you know, associating with devotees. The same basic stuff, really. The classics. Yeah. More reflections, questions, comments?
I like the fact that, you know, it's you have to be reminded to keep the main thing the main thing. And he just
Main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing.
I mean, he got so consumed by writing all the Mahabharata, the Vedas, and doing everything that the point of it was not. It was there, but it was probably buried so deeply. And a lot of what Vyasadeva was trying to do was make things clearer, so that anyone could access them. And I think that he felt, well, I sort of missed the mark on that. I've missed the mark on this, and can you help me to understand what I had missed? So it was really beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. That intentionality he had is very important because he's a liberated soul. He's not writing for his ego. He's not writing for any other purpose. He's not writing to be remembered personally. He's writing as a service for others to help uplift them. And so he's deeply, keenly meditating on how will this be received. I'm not like Vyasadeva, I can't really relate to that, but I can say that as somebody who's trying to represent spiritual knowledge in a certain cultural context and time and place, I've learned to become very sensitive to how Prabhupada is speaking, and will people understand it? Will they misunderstand him? You know, you notice like I've gone out of my way to like take the he pronoun and make it they, and it's like I'm 100% convinced that if Srila Prabhupada walked into the room after offering my obeisances, I could explain to him why I've done that, and it's not changed the essence of anything. Things like that, right? Like you have to be very careful, very sensitive to like, what do people need to swallow the medicine, right? So he was thinking like that. What do they need? What is best for them? And so his feeling of like, something's not quite right, was based on the desire to serve, right? And as such, he's therefore then qualified to receive guidance internally and externally about how to serve better, right? Otherwise, we don't always get that. You might get like a certain kind of guidance how to like do some material thing better because that's what karma is like you're qualified. Maybe you're Mozart. You're like, you have this inspiration. You wake up with a full-fledged, you know, symphony in your mind. You have that intuition, but most of the time we don't have intuition so clearly. But the way you get intuition is by refining your purpose. Vyasadeva had a clear purpose to serve the benefit of living entities within the ordained service he'd been given to present scripture. He didn't create the service for himself, it was given to him. Another sign of humility is like, he didn't take it and run. Like, this is my service, all right, it's mine, no one else do it. It's given to him. So when you have a service and you're trying to do it well, Krishna will guide you how to be excellent at it. So yeah, that intentionality was first and foremost. More reflections.
For me, it's all feeling so sweet.
Yeah.
Like, you know, no one came necessarily up to Vyas and was like, you didn't really hit the mark. It's like it came through him,
Really blew
through
it,
his
buddy.
heart, and like through his sincerity.
Yeah.
That he was like, he came to that conclusion, not on his own, but like through him and Krishna in the heart. And I think there's something so humble and so sweet and sincere about like his motivation and where even just this like momentum for the Srimad Bhagavatam came from.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of like the spoiler, which is, I think it's not really a spoiler at this point, but he actually speaks to Bhagavatam based on this inspiration and encouragement by his guru. So I think one thing I kind of caught in what you're saying that I want to bring out too is that this sense of like he didn't independently come to his own conclusions about he wasn't doing a good enough job. That's so true because his intuition was guided by higher power. His guru is guided by higher power and is a different person than him. He's guiding him from externally than him. And so there's a way in which like it's really important to recognize Vyasadev's experience here as different than like low self-esteem or self-doubt, right? Or fear based on our own karma. It wasn't a karmic experience. It wasn't like a psychological experience. It was spiritual intuition related to service. And one thing I've experienced in bhakti is that we have to learn the difference. And you get to learn the difference because we all are having our material experiences of self-doubt or self-esteem or whatever stuff comes up because that's what it's like to be a conditioned soul. We have that stuff. And you'll get this thing of like spiritual intuition and guidance internally and externally. And there's a different feeling. The first one has you in the middle, your ego. The second one doesn't. And you're receiving the guidance. You're there. You're not absent, but you're not the center anymore. And it feels different. It is sweet. So thank you for that qualification. You're experiencing this as a sweet experience for Vyasadeva. Yeah. Thank you. We got a couple minutes. Anything else from the keeners who are still on the call? Okay. Jai, we made it. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Sri Narada Muni, Sri Vyasadeva, Sri Shukadev, Sri Suta Goswami ki jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. All right, see you in the WhatsApp. Please give your reflections there. We got to chapter 5, verse 11. Thanks for the YouTube crowd. Thanks for the online crowd. Thanks for your reflections last week. Great stuff. I read every one of them. They're terrific. And the ones even like, don't feel bad for being like behind or whatever. There's no behind. We're already 5,000 years behind. It's okay. Just keep reading and chanting. You're doing great. Thanks everyone. Hare Krishna. See you next week. Haribol.
Haribol. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ishamya.
Thank you.